You're listening to a highlight from One Nation with Dov Lipman on Voice of Israel.
Hello to all our listeners around the world. You are tuned in to One Nation with Dov Lipman on Voice of Israel. I'm here in our studios in Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the Jewish people, on one of the most celebratory, meaningful, and inspirational days of the calendar in Israel. Today is Jerusalem Day, the day in which we celebrate the miraculous reunification of Jerusalem in the Six-Day War 48 years ago today on the 28th of Iyar. I must mention there's also a personal side of the celebration today. The 28th of Iyar is the birthday of my daughter, Zahava, who's actually named Zahava, which means the golden one, for being born on the day of our return and the reunification of the Jerusalem of gold. I'm excited for this special Jerusalem Day edition of One Nation, a show which we'll dedicate exclusively to Jerusalem. I want to share some of my own thoughts about Jerusalem Day and about Jerusalem itself. People often ask me, and I speak in various places around the world, and they want to hear the story, what prompted me and my family to move to Israel to begin with, and the answer actually is Jerusalem. I was teaching at a high school in Rockville, Maryland called the Berman Hebrew Academy, and a group of philanthropists sponsored a school trip to Israel. And their goal was to connect the students to the land of Israel. And they needed some chaperones to go along, so my wife and I joined the trip. And I don't know if they succeeded or didn't succeed in connecting the students to Israel, but I can tell you they did an incredible job in connecting the staff members to Israel. We started the trip up north, and they slowly worked their way towards Jerusalem. And we were on this bus. It was heading up the hills of Jerusalem, the Judean hills. At nighttime, they had Naomi Shemer singing Jerusalem of Gold playing on a recording in the bus. And we're heading our way up, and my wife and I are sitting there next to each other, and all of a sudden, tears are streaming down both of our cheeks. So I, of course, played the role of the very proud male, and I said, boy, these allergies are really something in the hills of Jerusalem this time of year. But at a certain point in time, I had to confront the reality that something was pulling at me very, very deeply. And that was the pull of Jerusalem, the desire to reconnect to the city, to this land. And standing there a little bit later that night, overlooking the city at a place called the Tayelet, the Promenade, my wife and I made the decision that we were going to really pursue moving to Israel. And when people ask me to explain, okay, so what was it that made you move, I actually cannot put it into words. It's something which was spiritual in nature. It was something at a soul level. And that is certainly a big part of what we're celebrating today. When we talk about Jerusalem Day, it's the return of the people of Israel to this city, which has had a pull and has tugged at our hearts and souls for thousands of years, even if we can't put into words why. Having said that, there is actually a deeper reason for the religious significance of the day of Jerusalem Day. And let's just go back for a moment to explain the history. From the establishment of the State of Israel in May 1948 until June 1967, we had a part of Jerusalem that was part of the State of Israel, but not the full Jerusalem. And Jews, for example, could not go to the Western Wall. They couldn't go to the area around the Temple Mount to worship and to connect in the holiest sites in Judaism. And as a result, even though we were building our city, there was something that was definitely missing. And at the same time, we weren't actively going to try to take it over. There wasn't a plan which said, now we have to go and get the rest of Jerusalem. And the Six-Day War starts after the countries all around Israel gathered to destroy us. That was their stated goal. And we're fighting against Egypt. We're fighting against Syria. And Israel pleads with Jordan. Don't get involved. We're not interested in taking over the areas that you control, which included the eastern part of Jerusalem. We're fine the way it is, and Jordan attacks anyway. And Israel, out of self-defense, fights back. And in the course of just a few days, all of a sudden we found ourselves with control over the West Bank, over Judea and Samaria, in Gaza Strip as well, and we reunified Jerusalem. And all of a sudden we had the opportunity to pray at the Western Wall, and to experience the wholeness of the city of Jerusalem. Now, the reason why I mentioned the religious significance of that is because no one looking at that story, at our capturing of the old city of Jerusalem and the Kotel, the Western Wall, no one can say that that happened in a natural way. And just to bring that point across, my father-in-law was a chaplain at West Point, the U.S. Military Academy in New York. And in West Point, they have a course called Military History, where they teach the history of wars, the X's and the O's, how these wars were won. What was the strategy involved in winning these battles? And in the United States Military Academy in West Point, New York, they don't teach the Six-Day War. They don't teach the Six-Day War because they say they cannot explain it militarily. There is no way a professor could stand up in front of the class and explain to the cadets how exactly the Israel Defense Forces did what they did during the Six-Day War. And that's why there's no other word that can be used other than the word miracle when talking about what happened in the Six-Day War and the celebration of Jerusalem Day. I've had conversations, especially since I joined the Knesset, with secular leaders in Israel, and all of them across the board said that when the Six-Day War happened and when we got Jerusalem back and it was reunified, something pulled even at the souls of the most secular Israelis, and they realized there's something deeper happening over here than just the might of the IDF and the wisdom of Israel's leaders. And this is why this is such a spiritual day in nature and a day which we have to celebrate. I have in front of me some beautiful words that were written by Rabbi Beryl Wine, a noted historian and lives here in Jerusalem, about the recapturing of Jerusalem. And here's what he says in his history book. The moment of the recapture of Jerusalem was an electric one throughout the Jewish world. The wall seemed to shed tears of joy together with the Jewish soldiers who stood before it in awe and reverence. It was not only a historic moment, it was a moment of faith and religious experience, even for hardened secularists. It was perceived as a vindication of the Jewish historic experience and had a profound effect upon Jews everywhere. As soon as the military situation permitted, a steady stream of Jews filled the old city's narrow alleyways, walking to the wall from which they had been barred since 1948, and countless Jews from diaspora flocked to Jerusalem that summer and fall. That is what we are celebrating today. The picture of the paratroopers who captured the wall that hangs on my living room wall. I could see it every day. It inspires me to recognize the divine providence and God's involvement and the miracle involved in our return to Israel and the recapturing of Jerusalem. So here we are. We've recaptured Jerusalem. It's ours. It's always been ours. It's reunified. And that is what we are celebrating today. And we give thanks to God.
Voice of Israel, your source for news and views on everything Israel and the Middle East.